Hey guys, welcome back to Dreamframer Photography. Today we are continuing our story about Photoshop layers, but this time we are talking about blend modes. What are blend modes, how they work, and how can we use them to merge this image with this image and get something like this. There is a lot of math going on here, but I promise you I'm not gonna bother you with any kind of formulas or anything like that. I'm just gonna show you how and when to apply certain blend modes to get the desired result. If you have any questions after this tutorial, don't hesitate to ask me, and also press that like button if you like this video and subscribe for more videos like this. Okay guys, let's learn about blending modes. I opened this image and of course Photoshop places the image automatically in the background layer and locks it. And then I added a new layer by clicking on the new layer icon, but this time I used type tool. Let me turn on the visibility for this layer. So I just clicked on the type tool and I clicked on the image and I typed home. Whenever you click on any tool in the toolbox, you will see the options for that tool on the top of the main window. One of the options for the type tool is the color of the font. In this case, I chose the color to be black. Okay. Now, if you're new to Photoshop and you have no idea what layers are, this is a good moment to tell you to go to my playlist Photoshop tutorials and find a video working with layers in Photoshop part 1, or just click on the card that showed up on the screen now. In that video, I showed you how to decrease the opacity of the top layer to see the layer below it. However, that's not real blending. Real blending is when Photoshop applies special algorithms to mix or blend pixels of two layers, so the colors and the tones of two layers, in order to achieve a desired result. So let me remind you, all these icons and things on the top of this layers panel are related to the selected layer, okay? So over here it says normal. That means that our selected layer is in normal blend mode. If I click here, you're gonna see a whole bunch of other blend modes, and normal is the first one because it's default. The second one is dissolve, and then we have another 5 groups of blend modes. They are grouped like this because blend modes in one group have similar properties. So again, blending is not about just looking through one layer to see the layer below it or layers below it. Blending is about mixing colors and tones from 2 or more layers to get a desired effect. I've seen quite a few people covering everything about blend modes in one tutorial, but I don't think that's the best approach because there is a lot of information. So I decided to split this into 2 tutorials and talk today just about the first 3 groups of blend modes and then make another tutorial about the rest of them. Now, whenever you open a new image, Photoshop sets the blend mode for that image to normal. Also, when you create a new layer, Photoshop sets the blend mode for that layer to normal. This simply means that our layer looks just like a regular image and it doesn't mix with other layers. If I go up here and change the blend mode to dissolve, let's see what happens. Nothing happened. And why is that? That's because dissolve blend mode works only with semi-transparent objects. In our case, the letters home are not transparent at all. So, to see the effect of this blend mode, we need to change the opacity for this layer. For that to happen, if you remember from our previous tutorials, I'm gonna go over here and pull this slider to the left to decrease the opacity of our layer. As I'm pulling the slider to the left, you can see that our letters are becoming transparent, but not in a smooth way. They are grainy or noisy. As I'm pulling the slider more to the left, there is less and less of these specks until we completely lose our letters because they became completely transparent. If I go back to the full opacity, we have our letters back. So the only difference between normal and dissolve in our case would be noticeable here on these edges. And let me switch back to normal to show you something. When I click on normal, you can see these smooth, nice edges of our letters. But if you pay close attention, you will see that those edges are actually made of semi-transparent pixels. So when I switch back to dissolve, these pixels become either completely opaque or completely transparent. And that's basically all about this blend mode. I don't think I've ever used it in photography, but maybe you will, so it's good to know. Now let's move to another two groups. We're gonna do them together because they're kind of related. They just do the opposite thing. So the first group will make your image darker, and the first mode there is called Darken. The second group will make your image lighter, and the first mode over there is called Lighten. So you can remember them by those names. These modes are sorted like this for a reason. For example, the mode Darken is completely the opposite of the mode Lighten. The mode Multiply is completely the opposite of the mode Screen. The mode Color Burn is completely the opposite of the Color Dodge, and so on. So that's why we're gonna do them together. Let's see how they work. I'm gonna click on Darken. Nothing, right? And that's because this blend mode actually doesn't blend pixels from two layers. It looks at pixels of both layers and decides which pixels are darker, so shows only those pixels. In our case, we have letters home that are completely black. There is nothing that dark in the lower layer. That's why we still see our letters the same way we've seen them before. So in order to see any effect, we have to change the color of these letters and see what will Photoshop come up with if we choose the same blend mode. So let me change the color of the text. To do that, while my type tool is active, I'm gonna go up here and click on the text color. And my cursor immediately changed into eyedropper tool, right? So I'm gonna click, let's say here, to make the letters the same color as this mountain. And look what happens. So, okay, so you can see that now our text has the same color as this mountain over here, and because the letters are now darker than the sky, we see the letters over the sky. On the other side, wherever the lower layer is darker than our letters, we see the pixels from that lower layer. So these mountains are darker than the letters, and we see the mountains. Isn't that cool? So Photoshop looks at both layers and chooses pixels that are darkest in that area and shows those pixels. So let me change the color now to something darker. If I click here, we made our letters darker, and now we see more of those. Now, there are some parts of the image where you can see the actual blending of two layers, and that's where the lightness of both layers is similar. To see that better, you can change the color of the text and have more or less of that. And just play with it to get different results. Okay, that was blend mode Darken. Now let's see what the opposite blend mode does, and the opposite blend mode is called Lighten. In this case, Photoshop should choose the lightest pixels of these two layers and display only those pixels. What we see now basically should be completely the opposite of what we will see when we click on the blend mode Lighten. We shouldn't see letters over the sky, but we should see letters over those mountains. And just as we expected, we don't see the letters over the sky because the sky and the clouds are lighter than our letters. On the other side, we see letters over the mountains because the mountains are darker than our letters. So let's go back to Darken and see the opposite. Okay, now we have two blend modes that are very similar to Darken and Lighten, and those modes are darker color and lighter color. They do almost the same thing as Darken and Lighten, but if you choose Darken or Lighten, you will have sometimes that smooth transition between the two layers. However, if you want to display the exact color that is darker or lighter, you will have to choose either darker color or lighter color blend mode. Depending on the color that you chose for your layers, the effect can look exactly the same like darken or lighten blend mode. So let's click on darker color and see. In our case, we have exactly the same result. Let's go back to darken and compare. You see, there is no any change, but if I change the color for the text, let's say I choose this color, in darken mode you can see the smooth transition between the two layers where the luminosity is similar. It looks pretty smooth, right? If you don't want these colors to blend like this, you have to choose either darker color or lighter color mode. Now when I clicked on darker color, we can see this harsh transition between the two layers, and we can see the actual color that is darker from both layers. If I chose lighter color blend mode, I would see only the lightest pixels and the actual color from both layers. Let's go back to darken mode and see the difference again. You see this blending between the two layers, right? Now let's go to our lighten mode and see what kind of result we can get there. So I'm gonna click on lighten, and as we already know, we see our letters over the mountains because the letters are lighter than the mountains. We see some blending over here, but if I switch to lighter color, then there is no blending anymore. We just see the exact color that is lighter than the color from another layer. So basically these four blend modes, darken and darker color, lighten and lighter color, can give you sometimes the same kind of result, sometimes very different. I don't use them much anyway, but maybe you will, so it's good to know. Now let's see what other blend modes do. Let me go back to normal and let me choose our old color, this one, okay? Now let's go to another blend mode. This one I use much more often. Let's click on multiply. You can see that now both layers are visible, but the places where layers are overlapping are darker than any of these layers separately. This is because this blend mode works in a way like putting two papers one over another and looking through them. So now we see both layers, but they are darker wherever there is any paint on them. If I decrease the opacity, I can decrease the effect or increase it. So never forget about the opacity slider. You can always use it with any blend mode, okay? You can use multiply blend mode to add shadows, for example. The opposite of multiply is screen. So what screen does is exactly the opposite from multiply. Screen blend mode takes into account pixels from both layers and blends them in a way to make them lighter. So it does completely the opposite of the multiply layer. Let me click on screen to show you. You see? We still have both layers visible, but wherever the text is overlapping the lower layer, those colors are lighter than any of these two layers. So let me go back to normal. Look at the letters. So letters are kind of, I don't know, light blue-gray, but if I switch to screen, the letters become even lighter than they were before. And multiply is the opposite. So far we learned about these blend modes: darken, darker color, lighten color, multiply, and screen. We're left with color burn, linear burn, and also color dodge and linear dodge. Let's switch to color burn blend mode. So what happened to our image? Again, the image is darker wherever these two layers are overlapping. So this whole group will make your image darker. However, when you click on color burn, you get more contrast than with multiply blend mode. Let's switch back to multiply to compare. So this is multiply, where everything is darker, but if I click to color burn, then you will see that we have much higher contrast. Darker areas are really dark now, and the lighter areas are not that dark. Also, the color saturation is increased, especially in these darker parts. Same thing would be with color dodge, just the opposite, of course. So now we have lighter parts of the image really light, almost white, and these darker parts are more saturated, much more saturated than if you used only screen blend mode. So these were color burn and color dodge. Now let's see what linear burn and linear dodge do. Let's click on linear burn. Linear burn almost reminds me of multiply, but remember multiply, it didn't have these dark areas here. So in linear burn mode, you get a darker image with higher contrast. Let me switch back to color burn to compare. So this is color burn. You see how much lighter are these light areas? If I switch back to multiply, look at the shadows. So everything looks darker, but the contrast is not there. If I go back to linear burn, then you can clearly see increased contrast, especially in these dark areas. Let's see what linear dodge does. If I click on linear dodge, then we have results similar to color dodge, but colors are not that saturated. Let's go back to color dodge and compare. You see the difference? And this is linear dodge. So basically, this group will make your image darker and this group will make your image lighter. Among each group, we have modes that will make the image more contrasty or less contrasty, as well as more saturated and less saturated. You have to practice a little bit with these blend modes to know exactly when to use which one during your workflow. I prepared another image to show you the practical application of this. So here I have two layers. There are two different landscapes. I have this landscape on top, and then below it I have our old landscape with the house. So let's say I want to blend these two landscapes and make one. I want these trees to be somehow here above the house. And I also want this sky to replace this sky from this layer. So how am I gonna do that? First of all, I'm gonna grab our move tool and grab this top layer and move it up to position it properly. Maybe something like this. Okay. Now, this is kind of the position that I want, but I see this sharp line between the two layers and I can't just decrease the opacity for the top layer because I'm gonna see everything from both layers, right? So what should I do? If I want to show the trees from this layer, the trees are darker than the equivalent area of the layer below. So how am I gonna show the trees? Well, I'm gonna choose the blend mode that shows darkest pixels of the two layers. So I'm gonna choose darken. And you can see that we already kind of have pretty much good result, except few things that we have to correct. For example, the tree trunks are lighter than those mountains from the lower layer, right? Let me switch off the visibility for the top layer. So this forest here is darker than the tree trunks in the top layer. So how am I going to hide that forest from the lower layer? I'm gonna hide it with a layer mask. We learned that in the previous tutorials. So I'm gonna make the lower layer active and click down here to create a layer mask for this layer. Now when the layer mask is active, I'm gonna go and grab our brush tool and black color, increase the size of the brush a little bit, and I'm just gonna start painting over the mask. And you can see that we are hiding the parts of the lower layer where that forest is. So whenever you paint with black color over the mask, those parts of the equivalent layer will be hidden. At the same time, we are exposing those parts from the top layer. So I'm gonna do this through the whole image, and I'm gonna speed up the process so we don't lose too much time on it. Okay, now if you want to hide parts of the top layer, like for example these rocks over here, you can do that by adding a layer mask to the top layer this time. So these rocks belong to the top layer. Let me switch back the visibility to normal so you can see that. So those rocks, if we want to hide them, we have to add a layer mask to the top layer. So let me switch back to Darken Mode. And I'm gonna click down here and add a layer mask to the top layer, and then I'm gonna decrease the size of a brush so it's more precise, and again use the black color. Oops, I did it too much. So this checkerboard shows me that those pixels are transparent, and to fix that I'm just gonna switch my foreground color to white, and I'm gonna paint back those parts of the mask. Easy as that. I'm gonna click X on my keyboard or click here. It's the same thing. It's switching between foreground and background color, and I'm gonna keep removing these rocks with my black color. Learning these shortcuts, like pressing X in this case, can really speed up your workflow. You will need to change foreground and background color many times when you work with masks, and the fastest way to do that is just to press X on your keyboard. So I'm gonna keep doing this, removing these rocks, and I'm gonna keep pressing X to change between white and black over here to fix whatever I mess up until I'm done with the image. So this is how easy this is. We just merged two landscapes into one. I'm not gonna bother too much with the rocks on the left because they are blending into grass in a pretty unnatural way, because I don't want this tutorial to last too long. Let me show you something else. Let me show you how you can use one of those blend modes from the Lighten group. So we have our landscape again, and let's say we want to add a moon. So I prepared another image, the image of the moon, and I'm gonna click Ctrl A or Command A on Mac to select the whole image, and then Ctrl C or Command C on Mac to copy this image. Then I'm gonna go to our landscape and click Ctrl V or Command V to paste this image, and then I'm gonna move it up here. The moon is of course in normal blend mode, but I want to tell Photoshop to change that and to show me only the light pixels from this layer and hide these dark pixels. So I'm just gonna click screen, and look at that. In one click we have the moon in the sky, and it looks completely natural, except the full moon can't be seen in the broad daylight because the sun has to be on the opposite side of the earth. So pay attention in those things. Don't put the full moon and the sun, for example, on the same side of the landscape. I'm not gonna go and try to find another image of the moon because this is just a tutorial. You get the idea, right? If the moon now looks too bright, you can always go and decrease the opacity of this layer and make it look more natural, but it's your decision. So now you know how to add the moon to the sky using screen blend mode. This was the first half of a story about blend modes, the other half in the next tutorial. Photoshop is really powerful, and it can do a lot of things that other image editing software can't do. Adobe has this great package for photographers that includes Photoshop, Bridge, Lightroom, a bunch of other apps including some mobile apps, and a website that can serve as your personal portfolio. All this costs only $9.99 per month. If you decide to pay for this subscription, I will be grateful if you use my affiliate link from the description of this video. That way you are also helping me make more videos like this. See you soon. Bye.